Washington's first spring practice is in the books.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And Lars, speaking of making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, shout out to the one Husky fan, that one everydayer who came over to us. Unfortunately, we didn't get his name, but he said, hey, I recognize those voices. I listen to you guys every morning. It's like, hey, that's awesome. We love hearing that. So shout out to you. Hope we get to see you again. And anybody out at spring practice, if you see us, feel free to say what's up. And speaking of which, Lars, we just got back from spring practice and feels like there's a whole lot to talk about. They weren't in pads today, but still getting to see so many members of this new team for the first time up close and personal. What was the first thing that really stood out to you from Wednesday's practice?
Well, I mean, just kind of the easiest one off the top is, and I know Sock mentioned it on the show because I was listening to him driving in, last names on the jerseys in practice. That is something I don't think I've ever seen a college do. I don't believe Jedd did that even in Arizona. So, and again, it's kind of symbolic of you got to know the players' names. You can't say, hey, 75, we need you to do this. Like, no, you need to get to know the players' names. So I do think that was a cool touch. But then when you get down to the practice, it was a good vibe. I think, again, it was
a really good vibe. That was my thing, yeah.
It's like day one, again, it's more or less about like, is it stiff or is it loose and fun? And without question, it was loose, it was competitive, it was interesting, and we'll get more into it. But I think that would be my takeaway just off the cuff.
So I could agree with you more, and I'm glad you said vibes, because I'm sure anybody who was in the stand saw me fist pumping like a moron when Sandstorm came on towards the end during the final team period drills over there. But no, it was fun. That was something that really stood out to me for a whole bunch of other reasons, mainly being just how tight knit and how together this team seemed to feel. And there are so many reasons that you could have pointed to and said, oh yeah, the vibes weren't great, but it's first day. It is what it is. No, this team had a real just tight knit vibe where everybody seemed to really be getting along. And even though a lot of these guys are so new, there was just some kind of energy there where it's, we don't think this team can win a national championship as of right now, but no, it seems like there are just a lot of things that are starting off in the right direction with a new culture, with a whole lot of new players and a whole lot of players that are hanging around. So yeah, I like where you're going with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that's the other thing too. Again, these kids have had some of them 2 coaches, 3, some even 3 coaches. I think, I don't know about 4. I don't think anybody else, actually, no, there might be a couple still left in the Peterson. Actually, yeah. There's a couple still left in the Peterson there, so 4 coaches, right? So if you think about it, all these guys have been through so much, and for a lot of these guys to stick around, Carson Bruner, Camp Biculana, just those guys that in the back end of the Peterson era that stayed all the way through, it's cool to see some of these guys, having that fun time, right? Because again, new coach, new thing and everything. But I think the way Jedd's acclimating to Washington is perfect. It's where he's not trying to be too hard. He's doing things that he wants to do, but he's not forcing it. He's not going out over the top. I mean, I do have a little pushback. I would like to see maybe just 2 fields used, not 3. So that's just a personal preference. It may make things a little bit easier for us. But again, we are down here on the totem pole. Jedd is way up here. So again, that's more just a personal thing. But again, I think the more that we go through spring ball, I do think what is a little bit of a teaser for what we'll talk more about what Jedd Fisch had to say after practice. But one thing when he said that, it was really kind of just symbolic where he said, I'm trying to put, how do I phrase it? Just Jedd Fisch kind of acknowledging the moment of Washington, like, hey, just take a moment to soak it in, realize what you're saying, things like that, really acclimate to Washington, put your own imprint on the program, but still let the kids kind of run it. And we saw at the end of practice where, the team was just breaking down, having fun. And it was different than Kalen DeBoer's staff. It was different than Jimmy Lake and Chris Peterson. It was a whole new vibe. And so I think the way Jedd's going about this is good, just aside from maybe condense the practice down a little bit more.
So I see where you're going with that. I definitely like that. And yeah, it's something where he talked about, this is a really special place to be here. And people are going to say what they will. Oh, well, he's probably said about every place he's been. Doesn't matter, because you can still feel that way in the moment about the place that you're working at. And I feel like one of the big things that we really do need to mention right off the top here is the offensive line, where there were a whole lot of different offensive line combinations that rolled out there. And you can definitely see a lot of the potential there. One person I did feel really bad for was Elijah Chiquette, who had to line up at left tackle later on in the practice against a Zach Durfee, who is just looks like he's going to be a menace this season. He's getting off the ball so quickly with a whole bunch of different pass rush moves there, where there are certainly going to be some problems, and we know that. And we're going to revisit that at the end of the spring when you and I feel there will not be nearly as many problems, especially considering the transfer portal. So, and that was something that Jedd Fisch that also discussed, saying, yeah, we feel that we're going to be in a much better position with that. And if the transfer portal didn't exist, we'd probably have some different questions, but knowing, that does exist and what could happen from that is really helpful. So I think that there are going to be some growing pains, but one guy who really stood out to me was Michael Watkins, who played right guard, the true freshman, played right guard for a couple series with the second team offense. And Lars, you're sitting right next to me, and I was, who is that guy? And as he's running towards us, pulling on a run block, it's like, I don't want to be in front of that guy, and I'm 200 feet away from him right now. But that kid, when he gets out of the open field, he can really move at 320 pounds.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that kind of caught to your point exactly, just caught my eye, where it's like this is an athletic offensive line, where you mentioned Elijah Chiquette, where when I'm just gonna say, when he had to sub in a one-off situation or a couple of play situation, it's not severe, nothing major, but just, again, out of respect, not going to mention why he had to sub in, but he subbed in at right guard after playing left tackle and right tackle. So again, his versatility and that athletic trait that all the that all the offensive linemen have, where it doesn't really matter where you're playing, kind of going back to Brennan Carroll saying, hey, everybody raise your hand, you're playing center. We got to see how many different guys can do it, but also how many guys can play a number of different positions. And when you have a spring ball that is so fluid along the offensive line, I mean, again, let's be real here. The defense got some pretty good push, but it wasn't as bad as I think we thought it was going to be for a day one.
Right. And I mean, you should factor no pads into that, but you're right. I see where you're going with that. And when you're talking about center, we should mention Zach Henning, where Zach Henning was somebody who during fall camp last year, you and I both noticed as somebody who was, hey, this guy's doing something. And we're like, who's 58? Oh, it's Zach Henning. And I remember just kind of having that moment with you where it's, this true freshman's on like the second team offensive line. Oh, wow. They seem to really, really like him. And now he was taking reps as the first team center on Wednesday, and it seems like that's going to continue for the majority of the spring. You and I saw him working a little bit after practice with Will Rogers and Damon Williams. I'm just taking some extra snaps, doing that sort of thing. And I just really like the way he moves. I kind of like his body type for the position, where he's a little bit taller than, a typical center might be. But there are so many things that you look at him and you go back and you watch his high school film and you just think back on what you and I have seen from fall practice, what we saw a little bit on Wednesday, and just say, in a pinch where I don't think he's going to be the starting center come September, but from what we've seen from him so far and in a pinch, I think that you could certainly do worse at the position. And Lars, with that being said, let's get into some of our other takeaways, because there was so much going on. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel, because the sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, the MLB, the NBA, the NHL, and so much more. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And speaking of number one, the Celtics, I keep telling all the everydayers out there, if you're on FanDuel, you should put your money on the Celtics now. They destroyed the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight, which is so wonderful to see for a variety of reasons, including just, the whole Sonics thing, which we won't get into. But Celtics, NBA Finals, just Finals winners, put those bets in now, because it's there. So, Lars, one thing that I think we also need to mention that you and I were talking about a lot in the stands is because there was so much of it is body types, because this team has a lot of really interesting, really projectable body types. And I'll just let you take it away from there, wherever you want to start this.
Yeah, so it's nice to know that Michael Turner is coming back to college and after dominating the NFL for so long, because again, I mean, even Jedd Fisch talked about it, where he's like, "Oh yeah, you're talking about Jonah Coleman's height, right? That's what's catching your eye." It's
right.
Like, yeah, sure. It's the height of the thigh in terms of if you lay him down sideways and measure the height upwards, it's probably almost a foot.
He's got some massive thighs, man.
And by the way, it doesn't slow him down. That's what caught my eye too. It's all these different, but none of them are bad, right? And I think this is something that you mentioned, or at least highlighted a couple of shows ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, where this strength staff kind of did some different things than even the last strength staff. And so I think how they're using the body types and kind of the plan for guys, I think will be pretty indicative. And when you see different types of bodies, right, where all these guys are athletic along the offensive line, yeah, there's some bigger guys, right, but none of them strike you as, wow, that guy's really getting weighed down by his, he's a big guy. But like Javon Parker is a perfect example where I think he's gotten a little bit bigger, but he's gotten a lot more athletic, right? Where he just seems like that natural enforcer where he's going to actually have some pass rush, where he doesn't have just that, okay, he's a big body, but he's not just a run stuffer, that old cliche, right? So I think the body types, to your point, there's a lot that can be done. And I think that's a perfect recipe for coaches with Steve Belichick and Brennan Carroll, where two coordinators who can get creative and use as many body types as possible in a number of different ways, that breeds success ultimately. So
you say Michael Turner, I say Mike Tolbert, where the more that I look at him, the more just it's the running style, it's the low pad level, it's the way he comes downhill and just kind of looks like a bowling ball when he's running the football. I put that tweet out there. I just said I think this guy looks like Mike Tolbert, but it's for all those reasons you just mentioned, where it's just so much fun to watch, because where I see the Michael Turner part is how shifty he can be in space, where you don't expect that from somebody with that size and that body type. And as Jedd Fisch said, he's just so hard to tackle. He's like, yeah, you guys know it. You guys seen it. He played Washington last year and played really well. Like, he's just a really talented back for that size and for everything that he can do. That's one guy that I know you and I have talked about him a lot, somebody that we're really, really excited to watch this year. But the other biggest body type that I know we have to hit off right off the top, because there are a whole bunch of other ones that I really want to get into, it's Ephesians Prysock, man. That dude is every inch of 6'4", and the way he moves at that size and his arm length and everything about him. I remember you and I had this conversation about Tristan Dunn a couple of years ago when he came in, and it's, oh wow, like that dude is really, really big. Ephesians Prysock he looks like he's bigger. It's insane to talk about. And then he's going through some of the lateral agility drills with John Richardson, and it was just what? Like, just watching that guy move it's hard to describe until you're able to get up close and watch it, and you just say, oh yeah, no, that dude's going to be a different kind of athlete on the outside.
Exactly. And I think the key was when sometimes we say guys are athletes, it's like they're kind of like gamers, right? Where it's like, yeah, he doesn't have the greatest, but he's got the size and he really turns it on when the lights matter. And to your point about doing it in practice, is like he has all those instincts. It's you can see it when in the game, when you go watch his game tape in Arizona and you watch him back in practice, it's like, yeah, I see exactly he has that athleticism. And I think it's one of those where that size you can't coach, right? But you can coach, you just have it or you don't. But when you have that size combined, because again, Keith Taylor was about that same height.
Yeah.
But let's be real here. The difference in ball skills, athleticism, and
strength is a big one for me.
Yeah, and strength. And just kind of, which overall, just if you look at all the other boxes he checks, there's a reason why they went to go get him from Arizona. It's like, hey, look, if you can pick, and that says a lot, right? Because his other teammate at Arizona, Dermaricus Davis, who also was once thought to be a Washington lean, they didn't end up getting him. It's almost like I think they still got the better cornerback. And again, that's no slight to Dermaricus Davis, right? But it's just the impact and everything that he does. And I think the important thing that I want to see from Prysock is, can he help some of the other younger guys, right? Because we saw Leroy Bryant and Curly Reed got a lot of playing time. I mean, we saw Leroy Bryant. I asked you, I was like, wait, who's quarterback one out there? And again, worth caveating, it's day one. Jedd Fisch didn't exactly explicitly say it, but it's one of those, You're trying a number of things. It doesn't mean that Leroy Bryant might not play, but I wouldn't expect him to be your CB1. But if he's behind Ephesians Prysock in that depth chart, I wouldn't be surprised.
No, and that's something where, yeah, there are definitely a lot of caveats that to be made in the secondary. And I feel like we'll hit on those a little bit more as the show continues, because just two more body types that I really wanted to get to, especially from the true freshmen. One is Paki Finau, where you watch that guy as an athlete on film. You watch everything that guy can be going forward, and you look at it, and then you match up with his film and you say, yeah, because we saw him with the first team at left guard for a little while. And it's the same thing where it's, okay, yeah, that's probably not going to happen by the time we get to the regular season, but that would be really big to just see his progression over the course of the season, and just knowing how talented he is as an athlete, as he continues to just get adjusted to the college game and do everything else it is that, just to get up to speed in college, that he's somebody who we should keep a really, really close eye on throughout spring.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's kind of why when we see these guys flash in day one, it's what we said on the other show a couple of days ago, where it's, yeah, you can show up early on, but then if you tail off, okay, what does that look like coming in the fall? Where I think there's a lot of these guys that we saw on day one, I think they're going to be there on day 15. Like, these guys are, again, there's some that won't, right? I think we're not going to mention them right now, but I mean, I think there's some guys where we looked on offense and defense, like, yeah, he probably won't be where they have him right now, but I can kind of see why they're trying it.
Sure.
Others, it's like, hey, no, that guy, like, I've been on the Leroy Bryant train from day one, but there's so many other guys where, to your point, there's a lot to like about all these guys early on. And I think, especially, I honestly kind of like it when you're not in pads, because you're able to almost show a little bit more of what you can do from a raw athletic perspective, right? Where, again, because if you have, extra pads on, you can be a little more confident. You can maybe look like you're hitting a little harder, but it actually is the mental football IQ side of things where, hey, how can you read things? Because I don't want to take one thing I want to kind of add to your whole body type is Demond Williams, right? Where you look at him versus Dermaricus Davis, where we kind of had that conversation where Demond Williams, deep ball is like Russell Wilson. Now, again, I know Seattle fans just take away the emotion of it and remember how that arc of a ball goes, because that ball that he had to Denzel Boston and the Dempsey was peak Russell Wilson. And then you look at Dermaricus Davis where, oh, okay, you are every bit of 6'4.5", almost 6'5", probably can get a little bigger, right? You can certainly add some more weight,
sure,
and, take those hits and things like that. But I like both of their decision making, and I think when you look at the kind of body types that they have, you can see why they took two freshmen, because they're different skill sets. They're both very good quarterbacks, but they can each do something different. And I think that's why when you go through that competition, you can say, okay, whoever wins this, it won't be because they're one better quarterback than the other. It's just this might work for these players, and then next year you get a new crop in, or you add some players at different positions and say, hey, maybe Dermaricus works better with them, or Demond is able to flourish with a new set. So I think the quarterback body types, and again, Will Rogers still quarterback one, took the first team reps, all that. But more or less, let's be real, the two future here is Demond and Dermaricus. Those guys, I'm really intrigued to see how that battle goes, because their body types, I mean, one's Kyler Murray in a way, right? And one's, think Troy Williams with Dermaricus Davis, where it's,
hey, shout out Troy Williams. We beat his team in high school baseball my junior year. We won the city title in LA. Shout out. I love Troy Williams. But so I'm glad you mentioned all that, because the last guy I wanted to touch on, it goes back to something you were saying about the athleticism, and it's Peyton Waters, where, hey, shout out Birmingham High School again. But when I looking at Peyton Waters, we saw him, run over with the corners for a minute before going back over with the safeties. And he is such a talented athlete, man. Just the way you watch him move, you watch his feet, you watch the way he's able to just move his hips and not have his feet slow down. And that's such a hard thing to do for a lot of kids at the high school level, is to just have your brain just say, all right, I need to move. And your hips and your feet are all working in the same motion. That's not an easy thing. And it seems like that's something he already has down pat. And we saw him work with the second team a little bit. And he's somebody where I wouldn't be surprised if he holds that position for the majority of the spring. And just the more I look at him, watching him go forward, he just seems like he has such a high ceiling, where something I wrote about a little bit over on Huskies Wire is about Tristan Dunn and just 5 players to watch this spring. And I wrote about Tristan Dunn saying the coaching staff is going to be looking for guys to step up this spring. And Tristan is one that I absolutely believe can do that, but he's going to have a running mate. And I think it's going to be Peyton Waters by the end of the spring, where he has all the athletic intangibles, and he's got the high football IQ. He's got the understanding of all the different positions, just not only at wide receiver, but in the secondary as well, that moving forward, he's going to be able to use those to his advantage in so many different ways. And I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch. And with that being said, there's still so much more to get to just from 1-2 hour practice. We'll see what else we got. Right after a message from our friends over at Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis and so much more. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free, and that includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep you up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, from March Madness to the NBA to the MLB and lots more, and not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. You can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels yet, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, go to Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, Lars, we're in the home stretch of day 1. There are going to be 15 practices that we're going to just continue to give some fun recaps like this moving forward. But what were some of the other takeaways? I know there are a couple of things you said you wanted to mention.
Yeah, so I'm kind of finishing off the other portion of that athleticism segment. New guys and old faces and new positions. Vincent Holmes, natural receiver. Like, took him I think 7 or 8 plays to make his first catch in the very first scrimmage of the spring. To me, like that tells me again, not a lot of experience with the quarterback. Actually, no experience with the quarterbacks. Now that I think about it, yeah, because again, all 3 guys weren't here last year, and so to have guys like that catching up pretty quick, I think to me that's why, again, to your point about Peyton Waters, that's why they can make that move, knowing, hey, you know what, let's try him over receiver, see how he does. Gets upfield very quickly. All the changes that they're making are good. And so I think that was one thing I really wanted to hit on, because again, when you look at the receivers, I had the tweet out there today where it said, Denzel Boston's going to be UW's top leading receiver this year. Again, I asked you, what's your leading receiver? Is that yards, touchdowns, receptions? It's yards. So again, when you look at the future of this room and the current kind of status of this room, there's a lot of potential in that receiver, just beyond the 3 obvious first line of Giles, Jeremiah Hunter, and Denzel Boston, because Rashid Williams got in some first-team reps. There's Keith Reynolds, I believe, got some first or second-team reps. And both of those guys, Rashid showed up. And so when you think about this receiver room, yes, again, there's going to be that, it's going to be probably, it's not 21 in the sense of the record, but it's 21 in the sense of what led to 22 and 23 with the trio that ended up emerging, right? Where 21, they were still redshirt freshmen. They were kind of working through some things. Then 22, they really popped. And then 23, they became first-round picks and second-round picks and things like that. So this receiver room, Jamarcus Shepard did not leave the cupboards bare, short. It wasn't his fault that they were somewhat bare short-term, but long-term, that room has some real potential.
It really does. So first thing that I got to hit on there, Kevin Cummings has awesome energy. Love seeing that. I have to mention, while we were in the Dempsey, we saw him run off the field and he was wearing cleats. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm that he had. That part of all that was awesome. But a couple of things is I actually wanted to hit on, we're on the other side of the ball. We're once again in the secondary, where you talked about guys that, might not be first team players at the end of spring, just some interesting alignments where always is something on the first day that when you see guys taking first team reps, it's the only thing you've seen since the final game of the year, which obviously for the Huskies was not as long ago as it was for some other teams, but it's still something to note. and two guys that we saw taking first team reps at the beginning of practice and some of the walkthroughs. And then in the first scrimmage period were Dyson McCutcheon in the nickel over Jordan Shaw, which I thought was really interesting. And then Thaddeus Dixon over Elijah Jackson at the other cornerback with Ephesians Prysock on one side. So both those guys where I think that they're both certainly going to be in the rotation. But that was really interesting to see, especially for Dyson, who was somebody that, it seemed like he kind of got lost in the shuffle last year, and seeing him just get a chance to prove himself and be with the first team for a little bit and just get some of those reps where he's I like the way he moves. Obviously, his dad being a former NFL player, he knows how to play the position really well. And it's just been a matter of finding a way to make an impact. And it looks like he and everybody else in that room truly are all going to have that chance this spring.
Yeah. And not to segue that, but to go one position group forward in terms of on the defensive front, one position group that had zero rotation, your linebacker. Like it is very clear who is starting. First and second team might literally just be Carson Brewer and Alfonso Tupujalo. Again, that long term, obviously, again, there will be other guys there, but I think the interesting thing that I have to take away with that is that tells me two things: how important that position is in Steve Belichick's defense, and two, the communication to get all the calls in, to set everything up correctly. It doesn't matter who it does matter to a degree. But it doesn't matter if you have Dyson back there, Elijah back there, EP back there. It doesn't matter who's back there. If the communication isn't good, you're wasting these snaps. So I think part of the reason why those guys played so many snaps in the scrimmage portions of practice was to help that communication and just kind of get everything set up alignment-wise. And we saw the defense had a pretty good day. I mean, again, first day, no pads, call it for what it is, right? But, I mean, somebody, whatever the over-under is on FanDuel for Zach Durfee sacks, just throw like 2,000 or 3,000 units on the over. Yeah, like I don't care what unless it's what the over-under, if it was at like 25.5, okay, maybe then you start to consider it. But like other than that, like Zach Durfee is going to be a man so pissed off, but he's also such a nice kid. Like I heard him walking across the field in times.
Yeah,
and so it's like he's that perfect football player of great guy off the field, but an absolute just what
beast
on the field. Yeah, just so many words to describe, most of which are not in polite company for a podcast, but still, like that again, everything is lining up for potential with this team, and so I'm curious to see throughout the rest of the spring how does the communication change? Do they have other linebackers that can step up? Because I will say the only cause for concern there is if Carson and Alfonso were the only two guys that truly are kind of leading the communication. If one of them goes down, which again you don't root for, but I'm curious to see who's going to be that second and third kind of communicator on defense.
So it's going to be Brian Parham, in my opinion, especially when you look at the linebackers, where he's somebody where I think and that's the nice thing about for a guy like that who spent so much time in one system, having to learn a new system with the rest of the team is certainly helpful, where he's also a senior. He's somebody who'll be out of eligibility this year, where I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the mix. I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Fowler is one of those guys for just being such a veteran leader on this team, being around for so long, if they ask a little bit more out of him. But one guy who, because we know Devin Bryant's been in a walking boot, he wasn't able to participate on Wednesday, and Jedd Fisch said they'll kind of see on his availability moving forward. But one guy that I'm really curious about, and he's just a really fun player to watch. I loved his high school films, Jordan Whitney, where he's somebody who looks like he's put on some extra muscle throughout the offseason, and he just really flies the football when he's out there on the field. And we didn't really see him get a ton of opportunities today, but that's another guy that I'm going to be really, really keyed in on throughout the course of the spring, because he's got the speed, he's got the agility, and he's got the eligibility, where you can't say that about everybody in the room, where he's going to be one of 3 scholarship linebackers remaining on this roster next year. Or no, excuse me, 4, because Anthony Ward's got one more year of eligibility. So it'd be one of 4 linebackers remaining on the scholarship linebackers remaining with that eligibility. So I feel like they're going to ask a lot of him. And they're probably going to ask a lot of Devin Bryant when he's healthy as well. So that's somebody who I think can really take that step.
Exactly. And I think the good thing is they have the guys in the room to do it. It's just a matter of letting them kind of get their feet wet. Because, again, when they were true freshmen, there was not much they were going to do. Let's just call a spade on that one. But you got to learn from Eddie. You got to learn from the other guys. And now can you learn from Robert Bala? Can you learn from Carson Bruner as a starter? And that's exactly kind of the progression you want to have, right? Where Devin Bryant and Jordan Whitney, whichever one, we had that conversation, right? Which one probably pops more this year? I don't think either truly pop this year because they're going to pop next year. I think that to me will be, this is the year where they should be key special teams guys, almost in the same way Tristan Dunn, right? Where Carson Bruner was a mad special teamer last year and the year before. Then he's going to solidify himself on defense in 24. Same thing, saying that same similar kind of progression seems to be what Jedd Fisch is following, where, okay, we obviously like our starters, we like our guys in the two deeps, but we really like the true freshmen, these young freshmen and redshirt freshmen, but we don't need to throw them out there right now. So let's see what they can do and where they can play, and then we'll go from there. And that's all you can ask for those guys.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your constant support. And hey, there are going to be 14 more of these spring practices, and we're going to be coming at you with more shows for each and every one of them. So please make sure you keep it right here on Locked On Huskies and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And please make sure to leave a like on the video, leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. If you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.